We get is it recording? Thank you. Right, so now we're resuming our Climate and Environment Committee meeting of the 28th of April. So now we're going to move on to item 8.3. So I actually will note at this point in time that our meeting is due to end at 12:30. We probably have a little bit more time to get through that and confirmation of the minutes. But what we have decided we're going to do is that item 9.1, which is the review of the draft climate mitigation strategy, which is going to go to public consultation, is going to go straight to SOF. We've had a really good set of briefings about this here. If any committee members, particularly community board members, have any feedback that they'd like to provide on that document, please talk to Councillor Hanford about that. Thank you. And I think it's going on the 15th of May. So it can't come back to this committee before then because there's no other committee meetings. So right, item 8.3, Chris, Gina and Matt. Or is it just going to be Gina? Yep, and Jason. On Jason, yes, sorry, yes. Should look at around the table a bit more. On page 27. Before we get into this, I will note that there are a number of so it's a noting paper, but but feedback is also required, and towards the end of the presentation there are a list of questions and thoughts that we have been asked to consider, and I've lost the page that's on again. Maybe page 35. So just keep those in mind as we're progressing through this. So thank you, Jason and or Gina, or both. Thank you.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. I am acting for Chris briefly today. She's not very well and no doubt sends her apologies. And my apologies too. Unfortunately, I need to step away at about 12:15, so I'll hand over to Gina shortly. Just wanted to give a really brief context. The team is very keen to get some feedback from you today in order to, I guess, reinvigorate the environment strategy process. And you've received a paper and you'll be getting a presentation that kind of explains the history of the environment strategy. Look, everyone loves a project where when you kick it off and nothing changes and it goes through all the steps that you thought you were going to go through on the timings that you're going to go through, and it lands exactly where you thought it was going to land. But those unicorns can be hard to find. The reality is there's a lot of moving parts in the environment space. You hear me talk in the district plan context a lot about evolving national reform. Well, it's not just the district plan that you need to be thinking about in terms of those moving parts. Strategies equally need to be mindful of things like evolving national reform, but also what's happening at the regional level. And the Kapiti Whātua was a good example of something that Council has been very keen to make sure that the environment strategy lines up with. So I'll hand over to Gina now and she'll walk you through the essence of the paper today.
Cool, thank you, Archie. Yeah, great. So I'll aim to be efficient as well, so we have as much time for feedback as possible. As Jay said, what we're looking for today is really some feedback on the options that we're proposing to move forward with the environment strategy. We've noted on the front there that we have done some work already with both this committee and with in briefing sessions with councillors on our environment strategy work. We have paused in the tail half of last year because of particularly the Whātua work underway and wanting to make sure that we can incorporate that into the process as we go. That is still going and likely to take a little while. We also have the RMA reforms, as Jay said, coming through towards the end of this year. And so we are wanting to look at how we can make progress on the environment strategy work in the meantime. So, context, we know that the environment strategy is a top 10 priority supported by a State of the Environment dashboard. And we had conversations through 23-24, and as I said, we had some delay through Whātua and the RMA reform. but we also know there's significant existing strategic direction and activity influencing our approach to the environment. It's a little bit fragmented across a range of strategies, including strategies that we own, as well as regional and national direction. And there's many other people who operate in this environment and hold the levers. There's quite high overlap between the original scope and some strategies that we already have as a council. And we're revisiting the scope and delivery options for the strategy in light of this context. So scope, when we're talking about the environment, what do we mean under our Place People Partnership model? We have land use, climate, biodiversity, water and ocean health, and air quality. And climate, as you are well aware, has its own strategy or set of strategies at the moment that we're working on. So when we're talking about the environment strategy, we're talking about land use, biodiversity, water and ocean health, and air quality. And we've already heard some things about our community aspirations in all of those areas through Vision Kapiti. Just looking at the shifts there, we're looking at increasing native planting, strengthening pest control programs, reducing damaging environmental practices in land use, implementing strategic growth plans, enhancing green spaces, protecting agricultural and conservation land, water and ocean health. We're looking at improving stormwater management, supporting coastal defences, enhancing water quality and air quality. Through Vision Kapiti, we got very little feedback on air quality. We're considering that good feedback, that we don't have a problem with that, but we want to continue with that. So that's what we've heard from our people. This was a table that has been previously presented in briefings, and it really looks at what are the focus areas that we were proposing to focus on across the range of the environment. I won't read through this in detail, but you have this, and we've talked through it before. So this was the scope that we were talking about. Our priority activities in there are state of environment benchmarking, mapping out existing actors and activities, alignment with target areas, identifying gaps and opportunities, and that second black box there notes Council's primary roles, collaboration and fostering partnerships, integrating outcomes and aligning environmental programs and projects, and supporting and advocating on behalf of local environmental champions. So this is our slide on strategic direction. And what currently exists. There's a lot of national direction, regional direction, and local direction across those four aspects that we've talked about. I'm not going to go into all of the detail, but I will talk about our local direction. And there you can see we already have a range of strategies: infrastructure, sustainable water management, our growth strategy, economic development, sustainable transport, reserve management plans, stormwater, open space, coastal strategy. So what we're saying there is what our current strategy is divided across a range of existing documents, including at that local level. And then in addition to that, as we talked about, there's a lot coming through that regional and national space at the moment. So I'll focus the bulk of my time on here, which is what we're talking about in terms of options for scope. Option one we've got there is an environment framework, or a bit of a meta strategy. So in that space, it would describe the environment as we understand it, Council's roles and responsibilities towards it. It would cover all four of the areas that we talked about, but it would be looking at bringing together what existing documents already say, and so there'd be limited focus on introducing new strategies on top of that, but bringing that together, outlining roles, and then identifying some key gaps and opportunities, with a real focus on monitoring and collaboration with other partners who hold some of those levers. That would allow a strategy document to be completed prior to the election. We are saying that we think we can do that in about 4 to 5 months. It recognises that we already have a significant amount of direction in this area, and emphasises growing partnership and understanding. It allows for the work in Whaitua and RMA reform to continue. It's not the same as developing a full new strategy, and it does place reliance on other work that's already underway. across all of these options, making sure that we engage with the stakeholders that we want to engage with and give them enough time to come to the table with reasonable thoughts is going to be key. And particularly if we're looking at a meta strategy, we'd be focusing on relationships with iwi and with Greater Wellington. So those will be our key stakeholders. Option 2 is the original scope of a full environment strategy. So that is comprehensive, creates new strategic direction, identifies the future state and changes required to get there. It's obviously the most aligned with the intent that we originally had, and positions us proactively to respond to some of those upcoming reforms, but it doesn't allow us to understand the extent of those reforms and fold that into our approach. It is also going to be take more time, which means we won't be able to do that before the election period, and we would be looking to complete that by the middle of 2026, so it would go into the new triennium. Option 3 is still a full environment strategy, but it is phased by topic area. So that's like we have at the moment in our climate space. We would be looking at starting with biodiversity and air quality, then land use, then freshwater management. Of those, the one that we would complete before the end of this triennium would be looking at biodiversity and air quality. As mentioned, it would still be making sure that we have the right conversations in that time frame. That would be the key risk to delivery for us. That would mean that phase 2 and 3 we're looking at in 2026. Option 4 is a reduced scope for the environment strategy. What we're proposing here is the same as the previous option, but we would just look at doing a strategy on air quality and biodiversity at this time. We could revisit that in the future, so that the timeframes would align to what we're saying we can do for option 3 there, delivering something by August, September. It would be an incomplete view of our environment strategy approach, but it would allow us to incorporate some of the feedback, particularly in that freshwater space that's going to come out of Whaitua and the resource management reforms. And the final option there, option 5, we would not progress with a strategy document. We would still focus on developing a dashboard to monitor and understand the state of our environment and deepening some of those partnerships, for example, with our iwi and Greater Wellington. It wouldn't produce us a document. It's the least aligned with that top 10 priority. So we could do that pretty quickly to get approval for that through SOF in the next month or two, and continue with some of the work underneath, but we wouldn't be delivering a strategy document at this time. So we do have a list of discussion questions there that you've had in LG Hub. We're really happy to just focus on, are there any options that you want to roll out? What is the priority? And I suppose any other feedback that you might have on preference in this list of options, so that we can then take that to SOF for approval on a way forward. Happy to move to questions.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you very much for all the work that you've done in this space. I just want to make a few comments before we go into more detail. So I suppose to me, without having any strategy, you're potentially going rudderless, and to me, I feel that we do actually need something, in whatever form it is. So the other thing I've been thinking about as well is that there certainly have been a lot of reforms that have occurred over the last couple of years, but to me, a strategy provides basically the aspirations that this council is wanting. And I know that there has been some conversations about potentially delaying some aspects of it, particularly the freshwater management, because of the Kapiti Whai tour. But, there's been a lot of work done in that space. It was basically an 18-month process that other councils or other Whai tour took 5 years to do. And I think we've still got a really good product. It's about, and it's obviously a GW1 run process, but it's about, again, our council saying, basically putting a stake in the sand about what our aspirations are, rather than actually waiting for what GW are potentially going to do. So, I
That's happened
suppose,
to me before.
with option 3 there, it talks about delaying phase 3 down the line, but there's no guarantees about that timing anyway. So I think it's about us taking control. That's all I'm going to say. So, first of all, our Mayor Janet.
Yeah, I talk quite a lot of what you've just said. So I'm not. I'd be surprised to think that option 4 or 5 would be palatable to this table. I'd be interested to hear if anybody differs from that view. So we're left with these first 3 options. My kind of question about option 1 is the other considerations, and I'm surprised that iwi is under other considerations. But that aside, if it's building on our existing strategic direction, how aligned are iwi with our existing strategic direction? In other words, is a lot of that already embedded into what we'd be building from in terms of creating a strategy that just builds on the work that we've previously done? That would be the big question with option 1 for me, because you can't have an environment strategy that doesn't embed Te Ao Māori for me. That's my view. It's the one strategy we have where that's probably most essential. So that would be my question around that. Having said that, I think that it's quite a good idea to build on what we've got and to have something in place. We could always timetable, a rolling review to cover the different areas like biodiversity, air quality, land use, freshwater management, and we could do pieces of work which reviewed those parts of the strategy in the future. But in the meantime, we'd have something to build on before the election, or in the next 5 months. I'm not particularly interested in the election, but in the next 5 months, and also in this calendar year, which is what I'd be interested in. So, yeah, just interested in that question around iwi and that possibility of doing option 1, but with phased reviews over coming years.
Thank you. Yeah, I think whatever option we would pick, we would want to have engagement with iwi. As you said, environment is so core to Te Ao Māori that I don't think we could do it without having those discussions. I would say that many of those strategies may have had some engagement with iwi already, and we certainly do have documents from other areas as well that describe some of those values. So we could certainly fold that into the process, but we would still want to be making space and time for our iwi to engage. I think we could absolutely look at establishing some kind of rolling review system alongside that to keep checking in on some of those topic areas. So I think that's a feasible option for us to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, kia ora. I had a couple of things, but just to the Mayor's point about folding iwi in, and to the point where about time frames for engagement with iwi. So for us, the Whai tour process was a very comprehensive engagement with iwi. There was some good work there, and it's only been stalled because of central government and reforms and things like that. But it has a whole list of non-reg recommendations in there that fold nicely into the strategy. So yeah, I don't see that being an issue, and given this is a priority for us, I would expect that we'd make time, not speaking on behalf of anyone else or my operations team. But my other question was about, and I think it's been answered by the rolling review, in terms of the timeline. I'm a believer that we've got enough there to build something as well, but what does that look like to our whānau and our community? Would it look rushed in terms of what we deliver? That was probably the only other thing that cropped up for me. I've no doubt that iwi engagement, we would get iwi to the table around this stuff, and the fights was a really good starting point. But yeah, that was only my only question.
Cool, thank you. And I think whatever we do as well, the ongoing relationship that we had would be really key. So this isn't a complete a strategy and then go away. It would be building that relationship and that process behind that.
So I agree with both Janet and Kim. There's probably two major differences between. Well, there's a number of differences, but two I'm going to highlight between option 1 and option 2 are the timeframes. The second one is that option 2 has a comprehensive action plan. Now, I think that it's probably better to have a strategy or a framework in place first, and then we can give ourselves some time to develop the action plan. I think by actually stating what our aspirations are, we've gone a long, long way to actually indicate to our community and to our key stakeholders, obviously with input from, and I suppose I'm probably meaning GW here because they do play a role in this, as to where we'd like to go. And if we delay it, 12 to 15 months, we're actually silent on that, and we don't have those opportunities to actually say what our aspirations are. So, yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes, Sophie.
Yeah, just to add that I completely echo your thoughts, Councillor Pravanov, and so yeah, I'd be in favour of option 1 for very similar reasons. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think if I'm hearing correctly, looking at doing a bit of a rolling action plan development underneath that. So get the framework in place first and then propose how that rolling framework of actions sits underneath.
Yes. So I think I will also add that the scope on page 31, the community aspirations that came through our vision kapiti work are, I agree with all of those. So I think that's a good starting point. Well, actually, that's a good point to note. The other thing I wanted to also note is that I went back into the report that we had in 2023, and to me, there's actually not a lot of difference between that and what, we're actually looking at covering in terms of the scope. So I think, obviously over time things do change, but I think that the key bones are actually there. So, yeah, just my thoughts. Oh, yes, Simon, sorry, yes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm just looking at option 3. We haven't really talked about much. That was probably my preferred option. I mean, I agree we need a framework and a structure there. Option 3 seems to take into account, possibly changes in other areas, but we still get some traction going on. It also gives something back in some reasonable timeframes. The mega option, any mega option, I kind of have concerns that we get so far down the track, and the scope is so all-encompassing that we kind of like lose direction, like analysis paralysis. And do we need a bit more focus? It means we do get something this year, and it does have a continuation plan, which does take into other reports and frameworks coming back in those timeframes. So, yeah, I was looking at option 3 as probably a good one going forward if you had the flexibility to actually establish a framework up front.
Councillor Hanford?
We haven't moved any recommendations, eh?
No.
Well, I'm happy to move the recommendations in that we vote in favour of option 1 as a preferred approach. Let me just see how those fit in. Provide feedback. Oh, we don't even need to. Well, yeah, just to come back to the point that Simon just made then, my concern with option 3 is that then we're looking at only specific sections of the environment in those different phases. If the phased approach was initially doing the strategic work, like Councillor Pavanov mentioned, and the second phase was going to be the implementation, then I feel like as a phased approach that would make sense. But to phase it across the different areas when we want to be looking at this in a holistic way about how they interconnect and their relevance to each other, to me doesn't make that much sense. And I have full confidence that if we develop the strategic direction across the next 5 months, then an implementation plan, and there's general consensus around the table that should follow. So that I just wanted to clarify. I hear what you're saying, Simon, about the staging, and I think that's important, but just the way that it's staged and what happens in each of the stages.
Yeah, that's great. If I could just chip in there again. I completely hear you on that one, because one of my other big questions are, how does this strategy fit into competing and often conflicting strategies within council? Things like, land use, building development, population growth and tourism, which is really all those aspects are hammering our environment. So when does the environment get a look in all this and take into consideration when we make future decisions? So I'm quite happy to go with option 1, as you suggest, Sophie.
So if I can just make comment to that, I suppose by having those aspirations written down, we're on the way to actually looking at those land use issues that we have got and managing our fresh water. But if you actually leave them until next year, then we're silent on it really. We do have some things in behind, but actually including it in the strategy now is a really good start from my point of view. Okay, so no one else is wanting to make any comments? So from what I'm hearing is that we are looking at option 1 as the feedback.
Cool, great, thank you. So we'll obviously take a paper to soft for agreement, but heard the preference for option 1.
Yeah, thank you.
So just through you, Madam Chair, so when it goes back to soft, would those extra suggestions around phasing different areas of work, potentially not around different, like biodiversity, equality and land use, but around implementation and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we'll have a think about
some options around
between now and then.
implementation.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's covered off in the soft.
That's awesome. So on that basis, I'm happy to move those recommendations on page 27.
Second to that, any introduction?
We've had a good discussion.
Yep, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The recommendations are passed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. Right, so now we are going to move on to confirmation of the minutes on page 60.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. It's a bit strange to have a paper coming to a committee and then not either moving a recommendation or tabling it. And just looking at these recommendations on page 36, there's actually nothing stopping us moving them today. And we could change E to note that the strategy will go to, that the draft strategy will go to the Strategy Operations and Finance Committee. So we haven't really had a robust discussion in order to recommend it. and just remove A, which is provide feedback, because we haven't done that. So we could move B through E, but with note instead of recommend. And then we've covered off this paper rather than letting it sit in limbo.
Okay,
We could even just move E. Note that this strategy will go to that this draft strategy will go to. In fact, that's probably better.
that's a good, that's a good
Just E.
suggestion.
Yeah, just so it would now read: note that this strategy will be considered by the Strategy Operations and Finance Committee on 15th of May, etc.
So just to reiterate what the Mayor has just said, we're removing recommendation A and changing what is written here as E to note from recommend.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Unless there's any discussion around the one endorsing.
I'll have a seconder first.
So to clarify, we're moving B through E with note instead of recommend in E.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Councillor Hanford seconding that. Any discussion? Okay, I'll put that to the.
This is the following paper. This is the climate mitigation paper that we were just going to bypass and send. I'm just suggesting that we move some recommendations to reflect what we decided to do with it today. Yep.
Could I please make a point there, Madam Chair?
Yes,
Um,
Mr. Black.
Point C, to endorse the proposed changed name. I'm not sure we should probably endorse that because we haven't had a discussion around that one.
I'm happy to remove that recommendation as the mover.
That'd be great, thanks.
So we'll just strike that one out.
So we have what's written.
I don't know why there's recommend under B. That should still be note. There should be no recommending motions, they're all noting.
Yes.
So there's B which notes, D which notes, and E which notes.
Right, so given that change, councillor Hanford?
Yep.
Agrees to second that. Any further discussion? Okay, so I'll put that to the vote. So recommendation for the review of the draft climate mitigation strategy ahead of public consultation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The recommendations are passed. Thank you. That was a nice way to tidy that up. Okay, so now we'll move on to, what was I say, page 65, was it? Yes, confirmation of the minutes. I'll take those as being read. Can I have a mover for those, please? Mr. Olsen, seconder. Councillor Warwick. Any introduction? No. All those in favour say aye. Against? The recommendations, I'm sorry, the minutes are approved. So thank you very much. We will now go to our closing karakia. Can I have a volunteer for someone who'd like to read that, or?
Yes, I can read
Thank
it.
you, thank you, Councillor Hanford.
Kia tau ngā manakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa, kia hua ai te makihikihi e ki ana, kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia tau te mauri, ki roto i a mātou mahi katoa i tēnei rā, haumi e hui e tai ki e.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sophie. I now declare our meeting closed and on time.